Okay, we're recording.
Okay. Good evening. We're going to kick off our information session this evening on February 1st. We'll do a quick call to order and go around to the school board members to explain why they are attending virtually on Zoom. And then we'll immediately jump into a recess so that we can host our information session. So what I'd ask is for each of members of the board to state for the record where they are, why their attendance in person was not reasonably practical, who, if anyone, is in the room with them, and whether or not they're able to hear the proceedings. So we'll start with you, Erin.
I'm Erin Saris. I am attending virtually due to COVID-19. I am alone in the room and I am able to hear the proceedings.
Thank you. Karen?
She in the picture?
Not at the moment.
What?
Go ahead, Karen.
Karen Jew, I am participating remotely due to COVID-19. I am alone in the room and I can hear and see everything.
Thank you. Becky?
I'm Becky Howie. I'm participating remotely because of COVID-19. I'm alone in the room and I can hear and see everything.
Okay, Allison?
Allison Marsano. I am at home because of COVID-19. I am alone in the room and I can hear and see everything.
Thank you. And last, Ken Haig, I'm alone in the room as well. I am participating electronically due to COVID-19 and can hear the proceedings and am alone in the room. Okay, so we're going to need a motion to recess to move to our information session. So I'd ask for a motion that the board recess until the conclusion of the information session, please.
So moved.
No. Second.
All right, thank you. And we'll just do a roll call. So I'll just call names out, please. Becky?
Becky, aye.
Karen?
Karen, I.
Allison?
Allison, I.
Erin?
Erin, I.
And Ken, I. So we're now recessing at 6:32, and we're going to move over to our information session. So good evening to everyone attending. We appreciate everyone's input tonight and attending the evening. I'm just going to quickly outline how this is going to work because this is a fairly unusual circumstance for everyone this evening. And we'll walk through that and then we'll get going through the different articles. So everyone over the last week and a half received the mailing in the mail that outlined what I'm holding here. So this is the first of two sessions. We'll have our session this evening and then we will hold another session on February 8th again at 6:30. So to go through the distinction between the two meetings, tonight is going to be more informative. We will take questions for clarifying questions on anything that's discussed. But what we're going to ask is, in the spirit of tonight, if you have opinions or feedback, you please hold those and you send those via email to the email address that was on that, or you can send them to the SAU office as well. The email address is mine. It's kenneth.haig@sau41.org. We will correlate all of that feedback, everything that comes through over the next week, and then we will review those, everything that's stated in our meeting on February 8th. We do ask that you list your name and address as well, please, so that we can verify registered voters. So as I mentioned, we will go through the articles. If you have a question, I'd ask that you, if you could, raise your hand and with a feature in Zoom, or if you want to try to type a question in the chat, that works. And then we'll make sure that we provide time for clarifying questions after each article. And again, I'd also ask, please, if for opinions and things like that, if you could send those via email or the other means that we talked about. That's how we'd really like to run tonight's event. So with that, we're going to jump right over to Article 1. And Andy, did you want to kick us off?
Yeah, Gina will screen share and I will do the voice.
Thank you.
So we are here tonight at the February 1st virtual information session via Zoom. The 5 school board members have already introduced themselves. Our chair is Ken Haig. Erin Saris is the vice chair. Karen Dew is the secretary, Rebecca Howie is a member, and Allison Marzano is a member. The administrative team, we have Andy Corey, the superintendent. Assistant Superintendent is Gina Bertzcog, Assistant Superintendent Robert Thompson, and Business Administrator Kelly Shealy. We also have Dan Molinari and Tricia Bully joining us for tonight's presentation. The first slide we want to talk about a little bit about the Brookline School District enrollment history and forecast. As you can see, in FY21 and FY20, we're not seeing much fluctuation at all. We're basically projected to go down a few bodies, which from the standpoint of the school system is not a significant change. And those numbers for 19, 20, and 21 have stayed relatively stable. They are up from FY15, where we were down to 533. And we use a service called NESDEC, which is a private company that works in the educational field and does enrollment projections. And they look at birth rate, building permits, things like that in towns. And we see that they're projecting in 22, 23, 24 that we're going to go up slightly, about 20 to 25 bodies, which is something that we thought was going to happen as a town just based on the development we're seeing. The Brookline School District cost per pupil versus the New Hampshire average. Starting off with FY20, the New Hampshire average is $17,189. The Brookline component is $15,040. One of the things that goes into our cost per pupil at Brookline is very fortunate. We have very little debt at this time. So when we divide our costs that the state asks for by the number of students, and you're not having any overwhelming debt or mortgages or things like that, it projects a very good image, and we're doing a very nice job staying below the New Hampshire average. So the budget process, how did we get to tonight? During July to September, the building principals provide a needs assessment to our business administrator. When we get to October, November, we go through a series of revisions where we have discussions around the different items and where we're heading and what we're making a priority. We then take that in December to the school board and the finance committee, and we get their feedback on the rounds that we've done. We then look at the tax effort determination using the final budget and revenue estimates, which come to us in January. We compare the tax effort percentage to the tax cap percentage, and we adjust as needed. And then we have the public hearing presentation in January, and tonight we have the informational session under this new format because of COVID. The tax cap calculation, again, we have the tax year 2020, which was for the Brookline School District budget for FY21. Our operating budget was $9,651,760. When we did the original FY22 budget, it was $10,025,776, which was a difference of 3.9. One of the things that came about that I'll explain in a minute was the tax cap budget, which is needed to be $9,867,097. And the reason for that difference is because we're losing state revenue this year. You've probably seen many articles in the paper talking about this. Revenue will be down. Warrant articles are roughly the same. They are definitely the same for the tax cap budget as well as the proposed budget in FY22. So that brought us to a total warrant of $10,527,012, which was a 4.1% increase. The tax cap budget needed to be $10,368,333 for a 2.5% increase. And again, what was happening is not on the expense side. We had done a nice job there. It's just when we lost the revenue, that is the portion that we had to make up for with the tax cap budget. So that brings us to the types of revenue. In 2020, we had $592,910. That includes a prior year fund balance. In 2021, we had $796,000. And in 2022, we had $796,000. So you'll see in both the tax cap and the original budget, the local revenue is the same. The state aid grant from 2020 to 2021 went up slightly to $2,134,564, and that stays again the same in both the tax cap and the original budget proposed by the board. The retained state tax, again, went up slightly from 2020 to $625,035, and that stays the same again in the original budget and in the tax cap. What the significant change is was in the FY21 state grant, Brookline received $591,264 to their local elementary schools. In the tax year 2021, or in the tax cap budget, that dollar, those revenue dollars go away. Now, we're not absolutely sure what will happen because the state is still working on their budget. But for us to move forward, we had to provide a budget that demonstrated the removal of those revenues. So that gives you your total tax effort, which in 2020 was $6,308,087. In the original budget was $6,971,413. And the tax cap budget was $6,812,734, which is the 8% that we're allowed to have local tax effort go up from year to year under the tax cap. And again, that difference is really that one-time state grant, $591,264. An overview of the warrants of what we're going to discuss tonight. Article 1 is the elections. So we have a clerk, a treasurer, and a moderator up for one-year positions. And we have one school board member's position up for 3 years. In the financial articles, we have Article 2, the operating budget. The original budget was $10,025,776. The tax cap was $9,867,097. The maintenance trust in both budgets was $75,000. That is funded from the unreserved fund balance. Article 4 is the special ed trust, again funded from the unreserved fund balance at $25,000. Article 5 was the contingency. Again, it comes from the unreserved fund balance at $40,000. Article 6 is the SAU budget. This is the Brookline School District portion of the SAU budget that is allocated to all 3 districts. That is $361,236. So the total FY22 proposed, again, the original budget was the $10,527,012. The tax cap is the $10,368,333. So in the original budget, we had a $415,792 increase, or 4.1%. In the tax cap budget, that's been reduced to $257,113 increase, at 2.5%. In looking at FY21 versus FY22, we went through by article to give you an idea of what it was from 21 to 22, as well as the tax cap. And you'll see in the operating budgets, it's the same numbers that I've explained, the $10,025,776, and the tax cap, the $9,867,097. Again, that difference and why the tax cap came into play was the reduction of the state grant. The maintenance trust stays the same over all 3 budgets, the same with the special ed trust, the same with the contingency fund, and the SAU budget in FY21 was $319,460. That is budgeted at $361,236 for FY22, and that's the same in the original budget in the tax cap. So that gives us our final numbers down the bottom for the proposed FY22 budget of $10,111,220, which was FY21. $10,527,012 was FY22, and $10,368,333 is the tax cap budget that we're discussing tonight. In order to get to the tax cap, as a result of that loss of revenue, we had to make a couple cuts between our original proposal and the tax cap budget. And that was done to reach the 8% tax effort. So we cut $158,679. We eliminated a tech integrator's position for $114,189. That's salary, FICA, benefits, health. That's a fully loaded position. We also had in the budget, we had proposed 2 new multi-tier support system paras for $43,640. And we moved a couple of projectors to our REAP grant, which is a rural education grant that Brookline qualifies for. So we moved the projectors over there for $850. In FY22, we'll look at the local revenue. We'll focus on the original versus the tax cap. So for tuition for preschool, it was $13,000 in both budgets. For the earnings, it was $5,000 in both budgets. Food service, we see a decrease of 3% to $165,000 in the original budget and the tax cap. In special ed aid, we see a slight decrease down to $50,000 in both the tax cap and the original budget from $56,910. Grants, we see again a slight decrease in grants from $195,000 to $190,000 in both the original and the tax cap budget. We have the voted fund balance of $140,000, which remains the same in all columns. And then we have the fund balance to reduce taxes. We had $409,731. That is a result of obviously last March to June, COVID was allowed us to save some money, and we were able to return that to the taxpayers. We are projecting $200,000 for both the original budget and the tax cap. So and then under other, we have $33,000 of increases of various accounts, which shows us that we're going from in FY21 $1,002,641 to $796 for both the original and the tax cap budgets. Adequacy aid, this is the money that comes per student from the state. In FY21, we were $2,041,387. In our FY22 and the tax cap budget, we're $2,134,564. We have the retained tax that is going up from $577,572 to $625,35 in both the original and the tax cap budget. Again, this is the one-time grant in FY21, the $591,264 that we are losing. So that is gone, and it's been replaced by zero in both the original and the tax cap budget. So your total state aid went from $3,210,233 to $2,759,599 in both the original and the tax cap budget, which was a decrease of 14%. Next, we have the Brookline School District tax rate info. Again, we're going to focus on the original and the tax cap. So as I've said earlier, the original was $10,025,776. The tax cap was $9,867,097. We have our warrant articles. In FY21 last year, they were $459,460. They're being proposed at $501,236 in both the original and the tax cap. Here we see the local revenue calculation, which was $1,002,641 in FY20, reduced to $796,000 in both the tax cap and the original budget. Your state aid grant, this is your adequacy money again, has gone up slightly and is the same at $2,134,564 in both the original and the tax cap budget. We have the retained state tax, which we're seeing an increase in. So it's going from $577,572 to $625,35, and that's both in the original and the tax cap. Again, here is that loss of revenue of $591,264. So this gives us a very important number, which is called the total tax effort. In FY21, that tax effort was $5,898,356. Next year, the local tax effort, the total tax effort, will be $6,971,413 when we calculated the original budget. And then the numbers we're proposing tonight, which is the tax cap budget, that total tax effort has been reduced to $6,812,734. So then you have your Brookline School District tax rates. So last year with the increase in aid, we were at $8.79. If we had gone with the original budget, it would have been $10.24. Because of the reductions that were made to conform to the tax cap, it's a $10 tax rate. The state tax was 87 cents in FY21. That is up to 93 cents in both the original and the tax cap, for a slight increase in that. So when we look at the total Brookline School District rate, it was $967, and in the tax cap budget that we're discussing today, it's $1094. That assumes an increase to the total tax base in Brookline, which is a consistent number that we use throughout the years. We'll be right
Sorry,
back.
I had to let some people in. So give me a sec.
That's okay. Okay. So tonight we begin the discussion of Article 2. Remember, for those people just joining us or who may have overlooked it, Article 1 is actually the moderator's positions, the school boards, the elections of officers. So the first financial article is Article 2, which is the operating budget. And this says to see if the Brookline School District will vote to raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant, or is amended by vote of the first session. For the purposes set forth therein, totaling $9,867,097. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $9,857,075, which is the same as last year's budget, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the school district, or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13 X and XVI to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. We had our public hearing on these articles last month, and the school board recommended this article 500. The finance committee recommended this article 300, and the estimated net tax impact was $10.41 per $1,000.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent Corey. So as we mentioned at the start, I just want to reiterate this. So we're going to open up after every article for clarifying questions. We'll look for raised hands, or those of you that want to come off mute and ask questions. We welcome those. What we are asking, though, is for opinions, whether for or against. If you could reserve those, and please either email them to the email address that was provided. That is mine. It's kenneth.haig@sau41.org, or send written submissions to the SAU office on 4 Lund Lane in Hollis, New Hampshire. We're gonna take all of those over the course of the week here, and then we will meet again next week on February 8th to review all of that feedback. And the reason for that, just so everyone understands, is to ensure we have registered voters on those pieces. So at this time, we'll open it up for any clarifying questions on Article number 2, please. Okay, so we do have a question in the chat from Eric Power. The question is, last year it was stated that FY21 kindergarten aid was estimated to be $120,535. What is the actual?
The kindergarten aid is actually embedded in the adequacy aid, so I don't have the answer to that question tonight. I can get that most likely if I can get the state to tell me what that breakdown is.
And to Kelly's point, that was a change by the state. They decided to make kindergarten part of the overall adequacy, so it's all lumped together and it is not easily subdividable.
Okay. We have one more follow-up here from Eric. Was it impacted by lower than expected Keno sales?
I don't have that information.
Yeah. Again, it was being moved away from Keno. That's how it originally came out. But when it moved to adequacy, it moved to Keno. But we'll again check on that and have that for February 8th.
Peter Webb, I wasn't sure how to interpret your message in the chat. If you have a question, could you mind just following up?
May I speak it?
Please.
Forgive me, I was struggling with the chat. Old fat fingers trying to do this. You guys are so familiar with what you're talking about when you're speaking of the original budget and the tax cap budget. And judging by the participants, I think you have a very educated group of people listening. But I think it's important for people to understand that the original budget is what your numbers would suggest you should have. But a year or two ago, a tax cap was voted in by district meeting, and that was an 8% cap. So you had to reduce in order to conform to that cap. Your needed budget to conform to the tax cap budget, and someone should speak to the mechanics of amending your budget. I will if you want me to.
Sure, by all means, if you don't mind, we can go through that.
Yeah. Well, in a normal year, when we have normal in-person meetings, the way the law is written is the school board has to conform to that 8% ceiling, but the voters at the meeting are entitled to exceed that and give them the 10% or whatever percent in excess of the tax cap. That's the right of the voters. Well, we have this strange situation now with COVID and these virtual hearings. As a result, the amending of the article of the budget will have to be done by the board itself. The virtual hearing statutes have delegated, in my opinion, to the school board the right to amend articles. It expressly does so after the week of public input, whereby voters are supposed to let you guys know. I'm sorry, I'm taking up too much time to be done quickly. The voters will let you know their preferences. It is your obligation to make what amendments you consider appropriate. So it's a curious twist, but the right for you to amend your budget to get you your 10 or any other number in excess of the tax cap is your right. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Peter. Very much appreciate that. That helps with the explanation around why we're doing the two meetings as well, so that that feedback is very valuable for those that want to provide it, whether for and against, as we discuss this next week on February 8th. I think we had another question come in. Just bear with me for a moment. I'm going to pull up the chat. Another question from Eric Power. What budget items make up the difference between the proposed budget and the default budget.
The default budget detail can be found on the website on the budget pages.
And I think these positions that Gina just had up were sort of the main pieces that make up the difference between the two. But I think someone has to come in, so it disappeared. Here it comes.
Yeah, they're slide down in slide 23 range. It looks like we've got a good breakdown of the default budget details. Slide 22 and 23.
There's a difference between the default budget, Ken, and the original budget. I think the question was about the difference between the original budget and the tax cap budget.
So that's the next question. Yep. So we have another question around what will be lost moving from the original budget to the tax cap budget. And those are the items that we mentioned on, let me find the slide there. It's on slide 14 of the packet for those that see it. So the tech integrator position, that's an RMMS, and as Andy mentioned, that's a fully loaded position. There are 2 MTSS paras coming around $43,600 roughly, and then the projectors are moving to the REAP ramp at $850, make up that total of the $158,679. I think it's worth noting too, as we were, as we went through all this detail in the public hearing last week, we do have some uncontrollable costs that have increased this year as well. Our special ed account is up $336,000 roughly, and then benefits via the state for state retirement are up roughly $91K. So that's an increase of $428K that on top of the loss of revenue are impacting this budget this year. So that's worth noting. And another key piece, I wrote down 2 pieces that really came out of the public hearing last week or 2 weeks, whenever that was. Question came up around the Article 2 budget tax rate. So I'm just going to read a couple of these off so everyone's familiar with it. 2019, it was $10.90. In 2020, it was $11.28. 2021, it was $10.48. And then now we're at $10.41. So just data points for everyone to be aware of as some of the good discussion that happened at our public hearing. Okay, there's another question coming in. Will the slides from tonight's presentation be available to everyone in the public? If so, where can they be found? So those are available. They're on the SAU 141 website. If you go to the Brookline School Board, there are meeting minutes for every meeting, and these will be posted there. So they are available for the public. And I see someone posted the link, so thank you, Cindy. Okay, let one more call for questions. Otherwise, we'll move on to Article 3. Okay, seeing none, we'll go to 3. Thank you.
Article 3 is the maintenance trust. To see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of up to $75,000 from the June 30th unassigned fund balance surplus available for transfer on July 1, 2021 to be added to the previously established school facilities maintenance fund. The school board recommends this Article 500. The Finance Committee recommends this Article 210. The estimated net tax impact. There's no rate increase in FY22. The unassigned fund balance is the sum of unspent taxes and revenues. expending $75,000 that could potentially be used, could potentially be returned as revenue equates to foregoing a potential rate reduction of 8 cents per thousand. So by utilizing the surplus to fund this, it means that the district does not return the $75,000 to offset your tax bill. And what that means per thousand is 8 cents per thousand. Under the maintenance trust, we have an ending balance in FY21 that we're projecting at 50,000. The 75,000 would be used to replenish that. The FY22 proposed use throughout the course of the budget, when we started from July to December and January, we proposed various items that account for $52,901. So we're anticipating the ending balance at the end of next year, if nothing broke or nothing went wrong or anything didn't happen that we hadn't planned, to be $72,099. The maintenance trust gives the board a mechanism should we open up school and then third weekend something breaks in terms of a boiler or something, we have that flexibility with that fund balance. What we're proposing for FY22 is RMS classroom flooring at $22,723. RMS exterior door ramps of $8,000. And we have an HVAC controller replacement at RMS for $22,178 for a total amount of the $52,901 that we talked about expending.
Thank you. Okay, so at this time, we're going to open it up for questions again. We'll give a pause. So if you need to type something in or raise your hand, come off mute, we'll hold for just a moment here. I'm not seeing anything come through on the chat. Gina, are you seeing anyone on your end at all? Okay, so I don't think we have any questions there. So we're going to move over to article number 4 now. So Andy, if you don't mind.
Sure. Article 4 is a special education reserve trust to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate a sum of up to $25,000 from the June 30th unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2021. Be added to the previously established Special Education Expendable Trust Fund. No amount to be raised from taxation. The school board recommends this article 500. The Finance Committee recommends this article 1-2-0. They do not recommend it. There again is no rate increase in FY22 for the net tax impact. But again, the unassigned fund balance is the sum of unspent taxes and revenues. Expending $25,000 that could potentially be returned as revenue equates to foregoing a potential rate reduction of 3 cents per thousand. Okay. Beautiful. The Special Education Reserve Trust. Our current balance is $200,000. The anticipated use right now is 0, but that may change. We've had a number of different special ed costs. For us to use the special ed trust, I would have to hold a public hearing, go back to the board, talk to the finance committee before we could expend that. And it really is for unplanned expenses. So we hope to end FY21 with a $200,000 balance. We would put $25,000 into that fund and have a ending balance at the end of FY22 if we didn't use it of $225,000. That is our goal, to maintain that balance. One out-of-district placement can easily cost us in the hundreds of thousands of dollars or more. So this may seem like a large balance, but if one student moved into the district in August and had to have an out-of-district placement, which is mandated by law, we would have to find that money in the budget. This allows us a place to go, a trust fund to go to cover those costs, so that we're not reducing regular ed items to allow us to make that placement.
Okay, great. Thank you. So at this time, we will take questions again. And I see we have one coming in, so I'm going to read it. Question is, can the Finance Committee provide rationale for their non-approval of Article 4? Now, I know the Finance Committee is not officially meeting tonight, but I know we also have Brian on the call. I don't know, Brian, if you want to weigh in or if we want to defer that one.
I can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, great. I can address my own personal vote on that. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, that I voted against it. And my feeling was just that this fund is almost fully funded. I believe 225 was the amount that we had set as a goal. And I voted against it only because this is a really tough tax year because of the state support.
I've got 3 individuals. I've got a Jill Atkin.
Yep.
Jill is with us.
She's good.
A Kyle Lottering. I'm hearing from Allison, I should admit. And I have a TS, and I've sent a message to the waiting room.
TS is Tom Sullivan.
Okay, I'm going to let him in. So the only person I'm not letting in is call-in user 1.
Okay.
I have Aaron Saris coming in. I have someone named Jean that I can message.
Probably message that one.
Yeah.
Jean is Becky Howie.
Becky Howie, okay.
Yeah, once she's
Okay.
admitted, she changes her name.
Okay. And Dan Molinari coming in.
He's legit.
I don't know. I don't know, Ken, I might disagree. So I'm going to message caller 1. Actually, I can't message them, so I'm going to keep them in the waiting room. I'm not going to allow them in.
Okay.
Catch people up again, we apologize. We believe we have pretty much everybody who was on the call. We have made a decision. There is one person that's on the phone that has not been recognized. We've tried, so we are going to exclude that individual based on the Zoom bombing that we're experiencing. So we had just finished up, we're in the process of finishing up the contingency article, Article 5. I had said that the board had recommended that 5-0, and the Finance Committee had recommended it 2-1-0. Again, this is a net tax impact. It's 0 from the standpoint of we're using unreserved fund balance or surplus, but in reality, taxpayers are foregoing a potential rate reduction of 4 cents per thousand. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Haig if there are any questions.
Okay. So we'll take those. If you want, we'll pause for a moment. Any questions, whether it's audio or chat? Chat would probably be the preferred with what's going on right now. Okay, we're going to move to Article 6, which is the SAU budget now.
Article 6, shall the voters of the Brookline School District adopt a school administrative unit budget of $1,953,257 for the forthcoming fiscal year, in which $361,236 is assigned to the school budget of this school district. This year's adjusted budget of $1,918,864, with $354,875 assigned to the school budget of this school district, will be adopted if the article does not receive a majority vote of all the school district voters voting in this school administrative unit. The school board recommended this article 5-0-0. The finance committee recommended this article 2-1-0. The estimated net tax impact would be 38 cents per thousand. Bob, we just added a calling user.
Yeah, I did. I'm monitoring them.
Okay. The SAU budget is adopted by the SAU board. It has its public hearing in December. And at this point, the voters vote up and down on either one of those two numbers, either the adjusted budget or the approved budget. And then it is the total ballots of all three districts combined that decides if the article passes or fails. And I'll turn it over to the chair for any questions.
Okay, so we'll pause here. And if you have any questions, if you could use that chat feature, we'll give it a moment. Okay. Hearing none, we're going to move down to Article number 7, please.
Article 7 says, shall the school district accept the provisions of RSA 198:20-B, provide that any school district at an annual meeting may adopt an article authorizing indefinitely, until specific rescissions of such authority, the school board to apply for, accept, and expend without further action by the school district unanticipated money from a state, federal, or other governmental unit or a private source which becomes available during the fiscal year. The school board recommends this article 5-0-0. The finance committee did not take a position because it's a non-monetary article. This article is something that we have been doing on a yearly basis. You'll see it when we talk about Article 8. It's just a changing in wording, and it allows us greater flexibility to accept funds that become available. One of the reasons we're looking at this is because with the COVID piece this year and all the different funds and grants that were available, every time we would have to go to the school board for permission to accept those funds. This Article 7 allows the school board to provide us with that authority that we can go after those funds in the future. And I'll turn it over to the chair for any questions.
Okay, so first, you're going to open it for Article 7. Eric, I did see your question, so we'll circle back in a moment. So, question on Article 7 right now, if there are any, please. All right. I'm going to give it a moment. So I'm pulling up the chat real quick. We did have one question for Article 6 that just came in while you were reading Article 7. And we'll read that now. This is from Eric Power. The question is, what is the percentage increase for Brookline's share of the SAU budget?
It is 13%.
Thank you, Kelly.
Should I move on to Article 8?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, just to clarify on that 13% from FY20 to FY21. I think that was for 21 to 22, right, Kelly?
The increase from FY21 to FY22 for the Brookline portion is 13%.
Thank you.
Article 8. If Article 7 passes, this article is unnecessary. It states to see if the school district voters will authorize the Brookline School District to access future year state and federal special education aid funds in the event that special education costs exceed budget limitations. The school board recommends this article 500. The finance committee recommends this article 300. This is our traditional article. We are hoping to replace that with Article 7 because it gives us broader authority to where we can accept funds and for a variety of reasons. Article 8 just talks about the special ed components. I'll turn it over to the chair for any questions.
Just pause here for a moment. Okay, let's move to number 9. This is a new article.
Article 9, to see if the school district will vote to authorize indefinitely until rescinded to retain any unused portion of the year's end unassigned general funds from the preceding fiscal year in subsequent fiscal years, provided that the amount of year-end unassigned general funds does not exceed in any fiscal year 2%. It can be up to 5%. We're only asking for 2% of the current fiscal year's net assessment under RSA 198:5. The school board recommends this article 410. The finance committee recommends this article at 111. They're not officially recommending it. For FY22, this number is anticipated to be $129,519, which would be 2% of the budget. And I'll turn it over to the chair.
Okay, so we'll pause here for a moment again for any questions. Okay, we have a question coming in from Eric Power. What dollar is used to calculate the 2%? So what's a dollar figure there? Am I reading that right, Eric? I'm not sure if I stated that properly for you. Okay, I did. Okay, thanks.
I don't have that calculation in front of me, but it's the net assessment.
I think the question is, what is the net assessment? What does that entail?
Well, it's kind of a somewhat complicated equation. It comes from the MS-24 sheet and is applied after you take out adequacy aid, I believe. So I don't have the calculation in front of me. I just provided the number. Sorry.
I have that for February 8th.
Yep, I'm just making a note. We can explain that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Another question from Eric. Do we use this fund balance in addition to the other funds?
We presently don't have the retained fund, Eric. If we did, I think that would be a discussion in the FY23 budget to potentially eliminate the contingency.
And what is the rationale behind the 2% that was used for this when we can go up to 5%?
I think we were looking at a number that, first of all, was on the low end of the percentages. The second reason is when you look at that 2% of about 129,000, that allows us to eliminate the contingency and have discussions around some of our other retained fund balance articles, because you could use the 2% towards maintenance if the board so choose. So there's a variety of reasons we looked at that 2%, and also understanding that we're trying to get it off the ground, and it's a difficult year to retain that would be, I think, somewhat excessive.
Okay. So that is the last of the original articles. We do have 2 petition warrant articles as well this evening that we're going to go through. The first is Article 10 on a K-8 feasibility study. Andy, do you want me to read this? And then Eric, I know you wanted to have an opportunity to discuss this. I think we're going to be limited with screen sharing, but certainly want to provide the opportunity to share your presentation.
That would be fine, Ken, if you wanted to read it.
Okay, so I'm gonna read Article 10 and 11. Eric, after I read those, if you don't mind jumping in and providing your input. So Article 10 states, shall we direct the Brookline School Board to convene a study committee investigating the feasibility and suitability of expanding responsibility of the Brookline School District to grades K-8, with the committee consisting of a school board member, select board member, finance committee member, and 2 members of the public, reporting findings by November 3rd of 2021. Eric, if you don't mind coming off mute, we'll have a chance to allow you to speak to this further, please.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. This is Eric Power. I'm speaking on behalf of the citizens who signed for this citizen warrant article. And the basic idea behind the study proposal is to look at bringing the 7th and 8th grade from the co-op at Hollis Brookline Middle School and bringing it back to Brookline. So the co-op would become a 9 through 12 entity, and the Brookline School District would be a K-8 entity. And there's a few reasons for this. We have the middle school facility is very aged, and it isn't built really to be a middle school. It doesn't have the pod design, and it does have an aging HVAC system. We have potential for operating cost savings of over $500,000 a year, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we look at our current expenditures in the elementary schools versus the co-op. We have an opportunity to have potentially, if we chose to have a Brookline-only SAU, so that we could have a streamlined SAU and we could actually make that as part of this whole project. I'm going to talk a little bit about the grade 3 through 6 test scores in Brookline versus Hollis. And Brookline actually does, and I have a graph, unfortunately won't be able to see it, but I'll talk to it. The other fact is busing be a lower cost, especially shorter travel times for our 7th and 8th graders. They're typically 11 to 13-year-old children for us, and we'd be able to keep them in town. So we'd save on busing costs, but we'd also save them a lot of travel time over to the Hollis, to the Hollis Brookline Middle School. And lastly, there's been some student population projections from Superintendent Corey had talked about the NESDEC projections from October of 2020. And Brookline's actually going to see a 51% increase in grade 7th and 8th grade by FY29. Just to let you know, the Brookline Middle School building was actually built in 1953. That was 68 years ago. It had an addition in 1961 and 1982, had a renovation in 1993 and a maintenance upgrade in 2003, and then it had a major renovation and addition in 2005 that many people might remember. That building is actually have some challenges. You'll see in our Brookline Capital Improvements Plan that talks about the co-op. It's about $1.2 million in facility improvements are planned for that facility over the next 5 years, including things like asbestos abatement, asbestos tile removal, fire panel replacement, elevator replacement, HVAC maintenance, water system study, and energy efficiency study. So that's a lot of money to be spending on an older school. And the other thing is the school was configured as a high school, not as a middle school. So it doesn't have the ideal pod design for teams. And I apologize, I have a picture of a pod design that I won't be able to show, but I did show it at a previous hearing. And so it is available for people to see if you want to see it from the website. I think it's in the minutes. Brookline currently spends a lot less than Hollis in the elementary schools, about 17%. Hollis is about 17% higher than Brookline. We spend about $17,300 per student in K through 6, and Hollis spends over $20,200 per student. In the co-op, we're at, and this is FY21 numbers, current year numbers, we're at about $20,200 per student in the co-op. So if you take our 7th and 8th graders out and subtract it from what we spend in K through 6 for Brookline and multiply by the 182 students that we expect to have next year, that's $532,000 a year in operating costs that we would save just from those numbers from just looking at it. And just for a rough number to see, even if we spent $20 million on a school at 1.5% interest, that payment for that bond would be about $308,000. So that's much less than the amount we would save. So we'd still be ahead. And normally, if you look at costs in New Hampshire, the cost per student typically go down in the middle school and high school because of class sizes, but that's not the case with us in SAU 41 with Brookline. Hollis goes down in the co-op, but Brookline goes up. The office growth in the SAU has been substantial. We've had 15% reduction in students over the past 14 years since 2007, but now we have 3 superintendents. The SAU budget's up 70%. The one number I want to talk about is that in 2007, FY 2007, we spent $391 per student, under $400 per student. That's the cost per student for the SAU. Next year, with this budget that's being proposed, we're going to be over $800 a student just for how much we spend to send to the SAU to cover every single student in SAU 41. So that's quite a big explosion in costs. And you heard the number here. We're spending 13% more for the SAU budget this year over last year. And that's kind of a lot of money. And, we have to look at things. We have, our superintendent's very well paid, 10th highest in the state of 101 superintendents that are reported by the Department of Education. And we're one of 8 SAUs that have multiple assistant superintendents. The other towns that have them are actually cities, most of them, Derry, Dover, Exeter, Keene, Nashua, Plymouth, and Salem. So we can look at the SAU structure as part of this. And I have a couple graphs here that you won't be able to see, unfortunately. Just for Brookline folks, in case you aren't aware, the Hollis School District is proposing an Article 1 this year to spend over $1.5 million to renovate the SAU building and barn. And they're going to take that on, potentially, if they approve it. It's not going to be Brookline on the hook for it, but they'll certainly seek the costs, the fair share to be paid by Brookline in the co-op. So that's just something to keep in mind, that's a big ticket item that's going to be there. I'll talk about the test scores. I don't have some graphs, and they're in the minutes from last week. But English and math are about the same for Brookline and Hollis. If you look at the averages over the past 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019, grades 3 through 6 were about the same as Hollis. And in math, we have a slight advantage, especially in the most recent 3 years. So it shows that our staff at our Brookline schools, RMS and CSDA, are doing a great job educating our students. So I feel there's some confidence there that we bring our 7th and 8th graders over, we can do the same. If you look at the NESDEC projections, and sorry, you can't see the graph, but starting in the year 2023 and actually out to the end of the projections in 2029, Brookline's actually going to have more students in the middle school than Hollis. And that's going to continue at least till 2030 and maybe beyond. So it shows you that middle school is going to start running out of capacity. Another graph I have here is showing the bubble that's coming up in Hollis in K through 6. They're going up dramatically in their space needs. So Hollis would actually benefit if we moved the students out. They could actually use the current middle school for maybe 6, 7, and 8, or 5, 6, 7, and 8. So that's a potential there. And if we did decide this was a good thing, but through this analysis, we can actually, the co-op Articles of Agreement, which is essentially the constitution of the co-op, has Article 15, which anticipates a grade reduction. And it actually has a fair process to do that. So it actually includes provisions for reimbursing Brookline for our investment in equity in the Hollis Brookline Middle School building if we were to decide to go forward with a grade reduction. And we could use that towards a new school or an expansion of CACA or whatever we felt was necessary to educate our students. So that's an interesting possibility. So just in closing on this article, I just wanted to say that there are some advantages of expanding CSDA versus the aging middle school with the pod design and the improved HVAC. We have over $500,000 in rough numbers of operating cost savings that we could achieve. We could look at also accommodating an SAU for Brookline potentially. We may see improved student performance and outcomes based on what we're seeing in Brookline versus Hollis. The busing would be better for our 7th and 8th graders. They wouldn't have to travel as far or as long, and we'd save some costs there. This study, I think, shows there's some opportunities, and this realignment seems to be congruent with the population projections of NASDAQ. And I think it would, it appears at, first glance to support both the needs of Hollis and Brookline and our students. So I think it's a good time to look at this. We're not up against the wall where it's too late to do something, but we have time. So take this year. That's what this proposal is talking about. And I think there's ample evidence of the need and opportunity to really study this issue, to bringing Brookline to a K-8 configuration. And it'd be a proactive approach, validate the assumptions, develop plans, and evaluate the options before the need is right upon us. So I would ask that voters support this study to expand the Brookline School District. I think the study would tell us if it's a good idea or maybe it isn't, and we would be more informed. I think there's some good indications it is a good idea, at least worthy of study. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So we do have some questions in the chat to read. I just want to note, I know there was a public hearing last week, I believe, that is available on the SAU 141 website for those that are interested in watching that, where the slides are available as well. So that's under the meetings on SAU41.org for the Brookline School District. So I'm going to go to the chat first, and I did see some pop in. So the first is a bit of a, maybe it's a clarifying point, but this is from Tom Solon. We've been told at school board meetings that Hollis is not proposing a renovation this year. That is old, outdated information. So that I've heard that as well in our SAU meetings. I would concur with that piece. The question.
No, the middle school is not being renovated. That's not the proposal. The proposal is to renovate the SAU barn, the SAU facility.
Yeah, that they've withdrawn that. That's
correct.
That is a conversation that our board is a part of. It's not something that is being done without the consideration of all of the districts on the SAU level. And in light of everything that's gone on this year, that's something that is not going to be on the warrant this year.
Okay, yeah, they haven't updated the website because they still have it on a draft warrant that's going to be talked by the Hollis School District on February 9th. So I went by that if it was Article 1. So it's still there. To me, that looked like they were at least looking at it, but maybe you have more information on that. But that's what I had seen.
Yeah, it had been talked about relatively recently, but I think it's off the table now, but maybe not updated yet.
Right. Okay, thanks. So then there's one other note, and then we'll get to a question. So cost per student at the middle school was heavily impacted by a current bubble of special education students. So point of reference and data there. So the question Tom's asking now is, what study is being cited? I thought this was a proposal of study. You might have mentioned, Erica, a study previously in your review here, so your data to date here with this presentation, could you just maybe it's a little background there, how this was developed as opposed, and I believe this is, you're proposing a study. There was no study previously. This is your homework that we're seeing today.
Yeah, I mean, I've collected some data from the Department of Education. I cited some of them. There's NESDEC projections, which I got from the SAU from October of 2020. So that's the current, most recent NESDEC projections. And as far as the per student costs, I know that you quote different numbers in the presentation, and that's to compare to the state. But the number I'm looking at is, taking the total budget for Brookline School District divided by the number of students. Same thing for Hollis with the number of students, and the co-op for the number of students. That's not to compare outside of the SAU, but that's the total money the taxpayers pay divided by how many students there are, and that's a good way to see how much it would cost us. And those are all numbers that are basically been available, and that's how I came up with those numbers.
And is that number you're speaking to, the $532K operating savings that you've noted?
Yeah, so that number, and sorry, you can't see the slides, that number basically takes the 7th and 8th graders, the number of 8th graders we have expected next year, which would be 182. It takes the co-op per student cost minus the Brookline School District per student cost, the most recent available numbers, and then it actually multiplies that by 182, and that's how you come up with that number.
Okay. Question coming in. How do you account? Go ahead, Andy.
I just wanted to ask a question. There's a similar article on the co-op petition warrant article, Eric. If that passes, does Brookline have a year to study?
I think that it would be a study that the Hollis and Brookline would do together if that one passed, if you're talking about co-op. It's essentially a similar process, but it wouldn't be taken on by Brookline. It would be taken up by a joint team between Brookline and Hollis.
Thank you.
So how do you account for revenue in your CPP calculation?
The revenue is not accounted for, but Brookline gets more revenue, so it actually skew the numbers even more for Brookline if we did it. It would be even more. So the savings actually are probably underestimated based on what I have done, because we tend to get much more aid than Hollis does in the co-op.
Okay, are there any other questions? We'll pause for a moment. Question coming in from Kyle is, what impacts the aid being mentioned? So Eric, you mentioned that Brookline gets more. Is there anything you can provide there?
It's a combination of demographics. Is this the state has a formula, depends on number of students, depends on income. There's a bunch of things that go into it. And what I'm looking at is what we've actually seen between Hollis Elementary and Brookline Elementary, and the aid that we get has historically been larger because of those factors. There's a bunch of factors that go into that.
I have a question too, I guess, when we talked about the SAU cost. I'm not sure I understand how that would at all go away. It feels like there would be less absorption by sharing it with a smaller cohort of students now. Those services still hold, and the 3 to 4 districts at Brookline, Hollis, co-op all still exist that the team has to support. Could you help me understand why you think that there's going to be a savings there from this versus reducing absorption spread?
Yeah, I mean, the SAU does have a lot of staff over there, and I believe the current number of people working in the SAU office is 17, and we have 2,369 students in SAU 41. If you go back to 2007, we actually had close to 2,800 students. So we've lost about 15% of the population, but we've doubled the staff. And we had a staff of 9 doing the job for an SAU with a population of 2,800. We had 1 superintendent, not 3. And I think it would also, if we had 1 superintendent in a Brookline only SAU, we would have a BA. I think you could have a smaller staff. I think it's something you'd have to study, but I think at first glance, I think we have, and unfortunately you can't see the graph that I had made, but we have a relatively small SAU with a lot of senior people in it. And I think that's an opportunity to look at, how we're structured as an SAU and how many people we have, and and the levels of people, because we were able to do it before, with a much smaller staff. It's just that it's grown dramatically. And so, if we're building the building at the same time, we take that into account. We could actually build the SAU potentially at the new middle school or the expansion. And it's not uncommon for SAUs to have co-located offices. If you look in Milford, their actual SAU offices are actually co-located with Milford High School. So they've used the space there. So there's an opportunity there. How much you could save, you'd have to take a look at it in the study, but I still think there's enough, initial evidence to show that we could save potentially with an SAU in Brookline as part of the study.
Okay, I guess I'm still not understanding how the absorption, to me, it still sounds like all of those seats are required for the multiple districts. So I don't know that we answered the absorption. Potentially we're creating 2 administration offices now, as opposed to absorbing it across the SAU. And so, I don't know that that's really, I don't think we're offering anything there based on what you just stated.
Yeah, I think the study should take a look at it. I don't think it's a core part of the grade increase. I think it's an opportunity to take a look at it as part of it. I wouldn't take it as the primary factor. I think the primary factor is the operating costs that we would save, and also the benefits of keeping our children in town. I think that's why it's worthy of study. Before, if we let this go and we don't do anything, we're going to be looking at expanding the middle school again. And I just don't think that's the wisest expenditure of money for Brookline.
Okay, so I was about to ask something similar, so I'm going to read this question. I believe I heard a savings of 580 to 380K bond cost means roughly 200K a year in first savings. How quickly does that get absorbed with unexpected costs? And just add on to that, things like special ed or other unknowns that are not accounted for in this projection here.
Yeah, when you look at that number that's there, it's an average number for all the students. That includes all transportation costs. That includes all special ed costs. So it's actually got everything built in. And I said 308 and probably didn't say 380. So you're looking at $200,000 to $250,000. Just that's for facility. Paying for a new school. We'd still have that much to go with. I think it's part of what the study would look at. And I don't know what's meant by unexpected costs, because we have a lot of unexpected costs currently in our current budget and baseline, both in the Brookline School District and as well as the co-op. So there's a lot of things that popped up there in both cases. So I think that it is kind of a realistic first order number to look at it. And I guess
so I can add a little clarification out then. So for example, we by going to a smaller cohort in the SAU at the 9 through 12 and then doing the Brookline K through 7, if an unanticipated special ed comes in, you're not able to spread that, again, kind of the absorption model. You're spreading it amongst a smaller cohort. So that's an unexpected cost that aren't in any of these calculations that immediately gets factored in. So I think that's what this question was driving at, is something like that can't account for. And in these numbers, it assumes a very static profile.
Yeah, I think if you have, say you have a high cost special ed student in the co-op, if you have more students, you have a higher chance just because the population is bigger. If you have a smaller population, you have a smaller chance of it. So I think that kind of works out in the law of large numbers. You have a higher chance, it's, how frequent does that happen? That would be part of what you're looking at. But you have a smaller population, but you have a smaller number of special ed students too. So I think that's all part of it.
Okay. There are two other questions that came in. So this is from Allison. How does 2 SAUs offer a cost savings and the cost of a building when we have a different building that needs work?
Well, do we want, Hollis is contemplating, and they've done this for a few years, to spend $1.5 million on renovating that SAU building. The SAU building is partially driven by the increased staff, also the age of the building. That's a lot of money. I think if you took that money and you put it into a office space in a expanded CSTA or a middle school in Brookline, I think you would be better served by it. As far as the SAU cost, I think that you have to really look at that, how the structure would work. How many people do you need to service Brookline? You certainly don't need 17. Do you need less than that? You obviously may need half as many. I think we have to look at it. At one point, we were able to do the SAU. We were able to take care of the SAU with 9 people, and we had 2,800 students. And now we're down to less than 2,400 students, and we have 17 people. So I'm not sure. I think there's some opportunity there just looking at it.
First of all, the building that I'm talking about is not in the SAU. The building I'm talking about is here in Brookline. So that's step one, is that we already have buildings in Brookline that need to be addressed, and it's not CSDA. So that's my first concern is the building that we already have here that needs attention and that I have concerns over. And so I look at that, and I already know that a new building here is going to cost us at a bare minimum $20 million. Bare minimum. And we already know that because we've talked to architects and designers and everybody else. So I know the cost of what that's going to run us. Bare minimum. And so I look at that and I go, $20 million plus new staff to run a new SAU. And just because you throw in a new SAU doesn't mean your old SAU just gets downsized. When has that ever, even in corporate America, worked well? So I want to think about things realistically. And as far as transportation goes, the bus barn is in Hollis. So the cost of coming out to Brookline to transport kids to and from the schools still has to be accounted for, because those buses are traveling from Hollis to Brookline to carry kids. And now we have to have more buses come to Brookline because we still have more kids coming to transport kids, more kids to a different school. But now we have to have more of those buses because we can't overcrowd those buses. So you just shifted a dynamic. It doesn't necessarily translate into a cost savings. Sorry, Eric, go ahead.
I think there might be some cost savings there. We'd have to look at it. It might not be a lot. I'm not really worried about cost savings in the busing area. I'm worried more about the wear and tear on our students spending less travel time. I think that's, considering the students' well-being and how much travel time, I think that's something to be considered. So instead of driving all the way or riding all the way to and from Hollis, they would be in Brookline. So I think that that's definitely a benefit. And I see that you and I basically agree. I came up with $20 million as sort of a round figure for a school. I know it's a low end, but we would also get some money out of a middle school if we're able to do the grade reduction as a down payment towards it. So I think it's in the right ballpark, but I think it's worthy of a study. Whether or not the SAU is part of it, that's just an opportunity to consider. It may not make any sense. It may just make sense to move 7th and 8th graders over, or it may make sense just to keep the configuration the same. I think it's all worthy of study. There's only so much I can do on myself to get this going, but I think there's some opportunities here that are worth examining. And that's why myself and other citizens, we've been talking about this, why we think it's a worthy study to do so that we're better informed. Instead of making a lot of hypotheticals, we can actually get into some real numbers. We can look at what it actually could translate into. Or if it doesn't, then, no harm done, and we can look at it in the future when we need to.
Okay. We have one other question, and then we'll move on to the last petition article. Question is, how would your cost model apply if your proposed new building was an added resource for the co-op, i.e., have the anticipated growth remain in the co-op?
I'm not sure if I quite understand this question. How would the cost model apply? I guess I'm not anticipating it as a 7th and 8th grade school that would remain part of the co-op, although that's interesting possibility that we could have the 7th and 8th grade school be part of the co-op. And, that would be maybe a course of action to consider as an option, whether the grade reduction officially moves the 7th and 8th grade out of the co-op into Brookline, or maybe it stays in the co-op, but our 7th and 8th graders are in the Brookline Middle School and they stay in Brookline. So I think that could be an option. I'm not sure what the savings would be. We'd have to take a look at that, but that's definitely something the study committee could take a look at as an interesting possibility. I'm not saying it isn't. It may have some merit.
Great. Okay. All right, Eric, thanks. We're gonna move to Article 11. This is the last petition on the warrants for this year, and I'm going to read that, and then we'll turn it over to Eric again. So the article states: "Shall we adopt the provisions of RSA 32:5V/B, requiring that the annual budget and all special warrant articles have a tax impact, as determined by the school board, shall contain a notation stating the estimated tax impact of the article. The determination of the estimated tax impact shall be subject to approval by the governing body."
Thank you very much. This is Eric again, continuing, and this is Article 11, representing the citizens that wanted this. Basically, this article is to make the warrant a little more complete for the average voter, so that they see everything in one place. So I really like how the presentation was done by the school board and the administration. And they've actually kind of done this, but it's not actually in the warrant, but it's actually in the presentation. So after each warrant article, you would state something like estimated FY 2020 tax rate impact, $10.41 per thousand. So that if you voted for this Article 11, if it was approved, that would make sure that the tax impact actually became a part of the warrant in future years. And if there's no tax impact, then there wouldn't be any notation. It would only be on articles that would have a tax impact. I think it increases the transparency because it puts it right into the warrant articles. So when people see the warrant articles, they got a complete package on what they see. They see the number, and it's right there for them. So it's very convenient. That's especially important with the way we've adopted the SB2 system in Brookline. And so when people are at the ballot box and they're in the ballot booth, they actually have the numbers right in front of them with the question. So it's actually helping to make much more informed voters by having those numbers available on our SB2 ballot. The tax impact would be estimated by the finance committee, or if we had a budget committee, it would be the budget committee in the future. And it would be but the overall tax impact that's published has to be approved by the school board. And it's actually commonly used. If you look at other school districts around New Hampshire, it's very common for towns and school districts to actually use this tax impact notation. We just haven't chose to use it. But I think voters really like the idea of having it. It kind of gives them an idea how much impact they have, and it gives a lot of clarity to how much money they're spending. So I think it really is a good article, and I would ask for voters to support enhanced transparency for the Brookline School District by requiring the tax impact notation to be in future Brookline School District warrants. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Eric. We'll pause here for a moment if there are any questions.
I appreciate that transparency. I wonder, and I always wonder, even when we put this in the presentation, because that's an estimate, I worry about legally it being on the warrant. And I appreciate this idea, Eric. I wonder what it's saying, because if it doesn't end up being that way, what does that do for transparency? Because, I know I'm the type of person that will look at something quickly and miss the detail that it's estimated and have an expectation. And I just worry that there can be an estimate, but things can change, in a short amount of time and make that estimate inaccurate. So I don't know, like Kelly is the numbers person that could speak to the reality of that, but is that something, how accurate is the estimate typically for us?
It's going to vary for sure, because the tax base is not necessarily going to be 1.5%, and the revenue is not necessarily going to be exactly what we've projected. So it is, it could be wrong the second you put it on paper. So I would be hesitant about putting it on the ballot.
Yeah, one of the things I would mention is we always have estimates every year. It's just that they're not in one place for people, and they're certainly not printed on the ballot with our SB2 system. So I think, estimates are estimates. They could be off, but they're typically not too bad. And at least we have the best idea when you're voting on something. That's the only information you go on is what you know. And so having the best information available on the warrant for the SB2 balloting, I think makes a lot of sense for the Brookline School District. But I hear your concern, but you're putting estimates on the presentation now, and so that's something that people are kind of considering as they decide whether to vote on something or not.
Okay, thank you. A question coming in is, has there been any legal review or consult on this topic?
There are districts who do this now, so it's more of what their citizens select for what they want.
Thank you.
The RSA is pretty prescriptive on the language for this warrant article, so it's not difficult. It's basically the way we worded it, and it's pretty straightforward on, doing this. School boards and select boards can actually choose to do this. They don't have to be told to do it. This just makes it required that it's in the warrant.
Okay, one more call for any other questions on this. Okay, very good. I would be remiss if I didn't mention there was one last article. It's fairly simple, and I will read it. Article 12, other business, to transact any other business which we may legally come before said meeting. And that would be the last. So with that, thank you all for attendance and for working through the disruptions that occurred this evening. Appreciate the questions and the feedback, and those helping us drive tonight. Thanks for working through that as well. I believe we are going to, I'm just looking, so there is no motion to get back. So I'm going to conclude the hearing or the information session at 8:24 p.m. Thank you all for attending. We are going to switch back over to a school board meeting for a short update here. So you're welcome to stay on. Otherwise, we thank you for your attendance tonight. And just a reminder, on February 8th, we will hold another meeting at 6:30 as well to take all the feedback that we receive, and we will go through those. The board will deliberate, and ultimately we will have our articles available for the voting session, which occurs on March 9th, 2021, between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. So thank you all. And with that, bear with me for a moment just to get to my meeting outlines. All right. So we are going to move to agenda adjustments now. Are there any adjustments that we want to discuss as a board following up from our information session this evening? We will deliberate as well for the board on the two petition articles. So that is on the docket for this evening. Okay, hearing none, let's move over to the deliberations then. So the first is to see what action the board will take regarding two citizens' petition warrant articles. First being Article 10 on the Article K-8 feasibility study. So I'm going to read a motion. Shall we direct the Brookline School Board to convene a study committee investigating the feasibility and suitability of an expanding responsibility of the Brookline School District to grades K-8, with a committee consisting of a school board member, select board member, finance committee member, and 2 members of the public, reporting findings by November 3rd, 2021. So the motion, please, is to recommend Article 10.
So moved.
Thank you.
So oh, you just read not the motion, the article, but the motion is to recommend the article, right?
Sorry, you just, I was reminding you what the article was.
Okay.
The motion is,
Sounded okay, got it.
I ran on. So the motion simply here is to recommend Article 10.
Got
And
it.
Aaron moved that. We need a second so we can deliberate on that.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so that's on the floor. So now, as a board, we can discuss based on the questions that we heard and the feedback provided by Eric, and we can take a position. So with that, I'll open up. Is there any feedback?
I just, I appreciate, I always appreciate someone who is open to new perspectives on our schools. And I appreciate the effort that Eric put into this. I also appreciate his optimism and faith in Brookline and what we can do for our students. And I agree, and I agree that there is, that we have great teachers and there's a lot that we can do. I think some of the issues like costs per student and that are cited, some of the statistics and the SAU efficiency, I just feel like those are not some of the those issues are not necessarily some of the things that will be resolved by this particular this particular move. I think a lot of the changes in cost per student, as we've talked about a ton, are a result of things that have just been outside of our control locally. And it's not necessarily about whether we're in a co-op or whether it's our district or whatever. It has to do with state aid. It has to do with health care. It has to do with retirement. And those are the significant, I believe, drivers in what's changed since 2007. And I don't think that that's necessarily something that could be impacted by this. So I think, that there's a lot of hope, and a study is a study, like Eric said, and maybe there'll be a good time to look at some of these things with all that is going on right now. And I know there's never a great time, but I just think, the priority of this, for me, in my mind, of all the things that we need to look at for our students is pretty low relative to how we're going to deal with the aftermath of the issues that our students are having due to COVID-19.
Thanks, Aaron.
Well, along with that, Aaron, I feel like our priority should be to focus on RMMS, like Allison had brought up. That is an immediate need that needs to be addressed with our attention in a study. And I don't typically hear people say they moved to town because they want to tear the school system apart. They kind of come to town because they like the system that's in place with the co-op and the 3 districts and how things are working. So I'm not entirely sure how much support there actually is for something like this, but.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, you guys probably know my opinion because I'm so sweet about it. I appreciate the different perspective. I do. I find a hard time repeating something that's already done and finding a cost savings in it. So when we move something, regardless, if you create a repetition in something, you're going to automatically create a cost increase. So especially in something like 7th and 8th grade, where we have already that's where you really start differentiating courses and leveling classes. And so the number of teachers that we would have to call in and hire, and the staffing there just to meet the same needs of our students that they currently have with the co-op. I just would be surprised that we would find a cost savings. It doesn't mean we wouldn't. It would just be surprising to me to repeat the same thing that we're doing across a town that's bigger than us, that can help share the load, that we would find a cost savings. But like Erin said, I'm more, and Karen, there's two things I'm more interested in. RMMS right now needs some work, and we know this, and that's the place that needs to be studied, and how we can increase efficiencies there and save money there in the long run. And I think that's a better place to put a study together and find financial efficiencies. And second, we need to look at the social emotional needs of our kids and how to get them through the recovery of this pandemic, and how we can support them going forward, because this has been a terrible taxing toll on all of them, whether they've been in school, whether they've been remote. This has been life-changing for all of us and for our children, and we need to really focus on that, as opposed to kind of ripping more things apart for them at this point. That's my opinion, but that's just where I stand.
Thanks, Allison. Okay, so I agree with what's been stated. I think there's a couple things on the table here. Is first, we've had, since I've been on the board 6 years now, we've had 2 studies about dissolving the co-op, and both times they've come back against it. Extracurriculars is often cited. The opportunities for students is often cited. And when you start going to middle school, that's when those opportunities start existing. And I worry that we limit that opportunity for both the Brookline students and the Hollis students by splitting it up like that. I also worry about the socio-emotional piece. I agree with everything stated about COVID. That's very much in the forefront. But even if in a non-COVID environment, my concern is that's an opportunity for kids to start branching out their networks. They've only, Brookline's not a real big town, Hollis not a real big town. It's an opportunity to meet some other friends, maybe reinvent yourself sometimes. That's part of the maturation process. And we take that and delay that for only 4 years at the high school level. I mentioned the absorption, and that's the other piece too here is when I say absorption, that's your cost spread is now limited. So you're actually in a sense paying more for that same model, and that's creating inefficiencies as well. So I think we're doing the exact opposite of what we're saying. And there were a lot of questions coming up around the cost model itself. You can do a lot with numbers, and this certainly plays into why it's good, but I think there are those unanticipated, I really worry about the special ed absorption and things like that that can come into play too. So numbers aside, I like I mentioned, those studies really spoke to me previously on why dissolution of the co-op doesn't make sense. And Karen, you hit on it. The constituents I talk to, they move here for the school system, and breaking that up, we're breaking a promise, in my opinion, too. And that's, I have a concern about that. So that would be my piece there. Karen, or I'm sorry, Becky, is there anything you wanted to add? I know you're on mute, and I don't want to take the opportunity if you have anything you want to say too.
No, I agree with everything that's been said. And I do think that, merging with Hollis in 7th and 8th grade is beneficial. We've just experienced it as a family this year. And it's just been the best year ever. And we had a great experience in Brookline, but I think there's a lot of growth that goes on that you just spoke to, Ken. And I think, merging with Hollis is a great experience for the students of Brookline.
Thank you. Okay. With that, so thanks all for that feedback. Let's take a roll. We're gonna take a roll call vote now, whether we recommend this or not. That's the motion on the floor. So a yay is you're in favor of Article 10, nay, you're not. So let me just get a list of names here and I'll go down the line. So Becky, we'll start with you, please.
Becky, nay.
Karen,
Aaron, nay.
Allison,
Allison, nay.
Aaron,
Erin, nay.
and Ken, nay. So that is 0 to 5 and not in favor. Okay, thank you. So we're going to move to Article 11. Now I'm going to read it again, and then we'll put the motion on the floor. So the Article 11 is, shall we adopt the provisions of RSA 32:5V/B, requiring that the annual budget and all special warrant articles having a tax impact as determined by the school board shall contain a notation stating the estimated tax impact of the article. And that reads, the determination of the estimated tax impact shall be subject to approval by the governing body. So we'll need a motion to recommend Article 11, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So that's on the floor for deliberation now.
I feel like I would like to take this up as a board rather than see it this way. It's just, and I hate to come across like I'm, not in favor of putting something out there that could be beneficial, transparency, all of these other things. I would like us to have have this conversation on the board and maybe even over the course of this year and decide to put it up on our own accord rather than the idea of it being put up through a citizen's petition. I don't know. I don't necessarily, I'm not sure at this moment in time what, I don't know. I feel like I'd rather talk about this at more length and make this decision now. And, but it's up, it'll be up to the voters, and I'm good with that too. I'm not sure.
Thanks, Aaron.
I just had to talk and I really didn't have anything to say. I guess I'm just torn.
Any other feedback?
My concern with this kind of the whole SB2 structure is just educating the voters. If you don't show up to the deliberative session, you don't necessarily know what changes are going on. You don't necessarily know the background to what you're voting for. So putting this tax number on there, I feel like doing a really good job of putting it in the presentation. What's going on? What's the background? Here's the tax impact. There's that transparency piece. But you've got to get the voters, like, how do you get them to really read and dive into that before going to the polls? I'm a little nervous that putting that RSA out there and being a little restrictive of that, just looking at that number, the vote will be for the number and not for what's the best interest for the students and for the school district. And that's kind of our responsibility. So I can't be in favor of something that only looks at just the tax impact and nothing else without any background information on there.
Well, I totally agree with you, Karen and Aaron. I'm gonna just put it right out there. How many people believe that most of these voters come to our meeting and then go to the polls and really delve into it before they go, and they look at that number anyway and just vote based on that number? Do you know what I mean? Like, so in my opinion, this doesn't bother me, especially since we've decided to put it on our slides this year, to add it in. For me, it's kind of like, okay, this gives me a perspective of what it was the previous year and what it is this year if I'm looking back. So in that sense, it really doesn't bother me, because I feel that people who are going to get as much information as going to the polls the day of and looking at numbers anyway are going to have about as much information as they were when they didn't have that number sitting in front of them. The only thing I would love to see is that the town also has the same tax impact numbers. Do you know what I mean? So that there's something when it's, so that it's not just the school district being put out there, so that the people have a real idea of what not just the school district is costing them, but also what the town numbers are costing them. We have zero say in that at this point. But in terms of this, as long as it's saying it's an, and I don't have the wording in front of me, Ken, but it is an estimated tax impact, right?
Bear with me for a moment, I'll read it.
Sorry.
It says, the determination of the estimated tax impact shall be subject to approval by the governing body.
and we're putting out what it is. It is based on our approval. So I personally, you guys, that's the wonderful thing about this. We all get to vote on it. It doesn't bother me, but I can understand if other people do have issues with it. And I support you in your opposition.
Thanks. I'm going to read something from chat from Eric real quick too, just on that topic. The same tax impact question is on the warrant for the Brookline School District, Town of Brookline, and the Hollis Brookline Co-op School District, just for that piece, Allison, where you mentioned. I personally, I like the idea of transparency where applicable. I do support this. We have it in all of our slides. I don't think there's anything to hide from here, and I think it's nice to just have an informed opinion. So I personally, I will vote in favor for it.
You guys make good arguments.
Okay, are we ready to vote? Any other thoughts? All right, let's go to a roll call vote then. So again, yay is you're in favor of Article 11. And nay is the converse. So Becky, we'll start with you, please.
Becky, nay.
Karen,
Karen, nay.
Allison,
Allison, aye.
that's a yay. Aaron,
Erin, nay.
okay, and Ken, yay. So that is 2-3 not in favor of that article. Okay, that's the last item on our agenda. Thanks everyone. Thanks again for working through this tonight. I can't say, I know that was bumpy, and appreciate everyone working through that. This is hard enough without those kind of distractions in a virtual environment. So thank you. With that, we'll need a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so this is roll call. So Becky, we'll start with you, please.
Rebecca, I.
Karen,
Karen, I.
Allison,
Allison, aye.
Aaron,
Erin, I.
and Ken, I. So that carries 5-0. We're adjourned at 8:42. Thank you all.
Good night.